Jesus.
Let's do it.
We are diving deep into a text that I think for many people holds this really cherished place, for comfort, for assurance, especially when things feel chaotic.
Absolutely. We're talking about Psalm 91,
Right, Psalm 91.
and it's, arguably one of the most popular texts people turn to in, say, modern health crises or times of danger. It often gets read as this sort of ironclad promise, right?
Yeah, like a blanket guarantee. Be faithful and nothing bad can touch you, physically touch you.
Exactly. But the thing is, if you only ever read the familiar English translation, you're missing so much. There's this whole layer of cultural context, linguistic nuances, even spiritual warfare background that made this text incredibly powerful for its original audience.
Especially for people around the time of Jesus, right? The Second Temple period.
Precisely. That's the mission today. We want to move past maybe the surface reading, the purely comforting one, and really look underneath.
So examine the Hebrew Bible context, look at specific idioms, words.
And really get a handle on how first-century readers culturally understood this protection. And here's a bit of a spoiler.
Okay.
Their understanding, it involved a lot more than just, bad weather or tripping over a rock. It involved actual named demons, hostile Canaanite deities, some really heavy-duty supernatural forces.
Wow, okay. And understanding that supernatural lens, that's the key to unlocking its role in the New Testament, isn't it?
It really is. And here's the hook to grab onto right away.
Yeah.
Psalm 91 isn't just some general prayer. It's the specific Old Testament passage that Satan himself quotes.
Right, in the temptation of Jesus, Matthew 4, he throws it right at him.
He does. And once you see the psalm through its original lens, this idea of ultimate total spiritual victory, mastery over the powers of darkness, well, Satan choosing that text, it stops looking random.
It becomes tactical.
Highly tactical. It's a specific challenge to Jesus' identity as the Davidic Messiah, the one who's supposed to have this authority.
Okay, so that sets up our journey. We'll start with the Old Testament framework, those ancient names hidden in the text.
Then we'll look at the Second Temple period evidence. Dead Sea Scrolls, Aramaic translation stuff that shows us how people actually used and understood it back then.
And finally, pull it all together to see why it was so crucial, so tactical in that New Testament confrontation between Jesus and Satan.
Exactly. The deep history,
Yeah.
that's the scaffolding for everything that comes later with Jesus.
All right, let's dive in right at the beginning. Verse 1. It sets the scene immediately. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, Elyon. Why is that specific name, Elyon, so important right off the bat?
Oh, it's huge. It's like a giant theological signpost. Elyon Hebrew for the Most High. Whenever you see that term, especially when it's about divine rule, cosmic geography, it immediately plugs us into what scholars call the Deuteronomy 32 worldview.
Ah, yes. Deuteronomy 32, that's the passage describing how Yahweh, the Most High God, kind of parceled out the nations,
Yeah.
assigned them to lesser divine beings, the sons of God.
That's the one. Initially, these beings were like divine administrators, overseeing different regions. But as the Old Testament story unfolds, many of these administrators, well, they become corrupted. They turn hostile.
So they become the powers and principalities we read about later.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They're the spiritual forces ruling the nations that are often in opposition to Yahweh. So when Psalm 91 verse 1 says Elyon, it's making a massive claim. It's saying, look, if you dwell under the protection of the ultimate ruler, the one who assigned those other guys their jobs in the first place.
Then you're automatically shielded from their malice, their influence.
Precisely. You're operating under a higher authority. It frames the whole psalm in terms of cosmic conflict right from the start. This isn't just about finding a dry spot during a rain shower.
That makes a lot of sense. The scope of protection matches the protector's authority. Okay, let's jump to verse 3. The language gets specific about threats, deliverance from the deadly pestilence. The Hebrew there is dever, DVR. That sounds like where we need our linguistic detective hats.
It really is. This is a fantastic example of how much meaning can be packed into a single Hebrew word. If you look at major resources like, say, the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible, the DDD,
Right.
the entry for dever is really eye-opening. This word pops up maybe 50 times in the Old Testament, and it's consistently one of the big three causes of mass death, usually listed right alongside war and famine.
Okay, so it's a major threat category.
But the crucial insight, especially from the DDD analysis, is that dever isn't always just generic plague. It's often used in a personified sense,
Meaning?
meaning it refers not just to the disease, but to a specific entity, a demon, or maybe even a lesser evil deity. thought to be responsible for bringing that plague.
Wow. So not just a plague, but plague is a figure.
Exactly. We're talking about a specific personified agent of destruction. And realizing that helps make sense of a really interesting translation quirk that happened way back when the Hebrew Bible was first translated into Greek.
The Septuagint.
The Septuagint, yeah. This was the go-to version for many Jews outside Palestine and for the early Christians. So what happened with Dever in that translation?
What did happen?
Well, Hebrew has words that look the same, spelled the same, but mean different things, homographs or homonyms. Dever, Deli Bet Resh, means pestilence. But there's another very similar word, devar, that means word or thing.
Uh-oh. I see where this might be going.
Right. It seems the Septuagint translator, looking at those consonants, either made a mistake or maybe chose the wrong meaning.
Yeah.
They missed the personified plague demon idea.
So what did they translate it as?
Instead of he will rescue you from the deadly pestilence, Dever, the Greek Septuagint reads, and from a terrifying word, logos.
What a terrifying word. That sounds weird.
It's bizarre. It completely breaks the poetic parallel.
Right.
Why would God rescue you from a hunter's trap and a scary word? It just doesn't fit the context of deadly threats.
So that translation mistake actually helps confirm the original meaning.
It strongly suggests this, yeah. It shows the original Hebrew likely intended that specific personified threat, Dever, the plague bringer.
Fascinating. That distinction alone forces us to read this theologically, not just, well, literally about sickness. Okay, verse 4 brings in military imagery. God's faithfulness is a shield and buckler.
Pure defensive gear. A shield, the sina, that's the big one, covers the whole body. A buckler, sulcura, smaller, maybe round, for closer combat. It's total protection.
And that language, it feels familiar.
It absolutely should. Put a pin in this because it sounds suspiciously like the spiritual warfare language Paul uses centuries later in Ephesians 6.
Right. Put on the full armor of God, breastplate, helmet, and specifically the shield of faith.
To stand against the schemes of the devil, against principalities and powers. Paul is drawn on this same tradition, the same kind of imagery.
So Psalm 91 is using that same metaphor because it's dealing with the same reality. Cosmic spiritual conflict.
That's exactly the implication. This isn't just poetry. It's like an early manual for surviving supernatural attacks.
Okay, now we get into some really specific, maybe even unsettling names. Verses 5 and 6 list more threats. The terror of the night, the arrow that flies by day, that deadly pestilence, Dever again, and the destruction that wastes at noonday. You're saying these weren't just descriptions?
Not according to the cultural understanding at the time, especially leading into the Second Temple period. For them, these specific phrases alongside Dever were basically recognized as names of hostile Canaanite deities or demonic forces.
Known figures from the surrounding cultures.
Exactly. Figures known across the ancient Near East Israel's neighborhood, essentially.
Yeah.
Jewish interpreters had already sort of demoted these figures from being rival gods to being demons or agents of chaos under Yahweh's ultimate authority. But the names were still potent. The biblical writers are basically calling out the enemy roster here.
Let's break them down. The destruction that wastes at noonday. The Hebrew is ketev, QTV. Basic meaning destruction, but you're saying there's more to it.
There really seems to be. Its position here, listed alongside Dever, and, as we'll see, Resheph, strongly suggests it's being used as a proper name, or at least carries those overtones.
Is there evidence outside the Bible for a figure named Ketev?
Well, we have really interesting linguistic connections from Ugarit, that ancient Canaanite city.
Yeah.
Texts found there mention a figure named Kazab, QZB, very similar consonants.
And who's Kazab in Ugaritic mythology?
Kazab is described as a kinsman, a relative of Mot.
Mot, that name rings a bell. God of death.
The big one, yeah, the Canaanite god of death, the underworld, sterility, drought. Super cheerful guy. So if Ketev in Hebrew is linguistically related to a relative of the Canaanite god of death,
It strongly implies Ketev is also a personified agent of death, maybe like Mot's deputy or something.
that's the idea. Destruction at noonday isn't just heat stroke, it's potentially an attack by this specific entity, Death's assistant.
Wow, okay. What about the arrow that flies by day in verse 5?
That one points pretty directly to another major player in the A&E pantheon, Resheph.
Resheph, what's his deal?
Resheph is all about plague, pestilence, and significantly, archery. He's often depicted as an archer god.
An archer. So the arrow that flies by day.
It's likely not just talking about a literal arrow in battle. It's an oblique reference to Resheph himself, the one who shoots the arrows of plague. We see this connection in the Bible, too. Remember Deuteronomy 32?
Yeah, where Elion was mentioned.
Well, later in that same chapter, Deuteronomy 32.24, Yahweh is pronouncing curses on unfaithful Israel. He says they'll be devoured by burning heat, consumed by Rasheph and poisonous pestilence, Ketef.
Whoa, there they are together, Rasheph and Ketef, as named divine judgments.
Exactly. It shows these names were part of Israelite thought for a long time, seen as agents Yahweh could unleash. And that visual of Rasheph as the archer in Ugaritic art just nails the connection. Psalm 91's arrow by day is almost certainly pointing to him.
This is incredible. The psalm is naming specific spiritual enemies known to the culture.
It is. But it's doing more than just naming them. The biblical writers are engaging in theological warfare here. They use the familiar names, the ones people feared, but they completely redefine who's actually in charge.
How so? Where do we see that redefinition?
Look at the prophets. Hosea 13.1 more. It's amazing. God is taunting Mot, the god of death himself. He said, "O death, Mot, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your destruction?" Kittev. Note, source used sting for Kittev, but destruction is closer translation and fits context better.
He's challenging death and his lieutenants directly.
Absolutely. It's a powerful polemic. Yahweh's basically saying, Mot, your supposed power, your agents, Dever and Kittev, they're nothing against me. I hold the keys. I can ransom my people from your grasp. It asserts Yahweh's total supremacy.
Okay, that's Hosea. Any others?
Habakkuk 3.5 is stunning too. It pictures Yahweh marching out as the divine warrior. And what does it say? Before him went pestilence, Dever, and plague Rasheph followed at his heels.
So Dever and Rasheph aren't independent enemies there?
Not at all. They're marching under Yahweh's command. There's like his vanguard, his attendants. He's completely co-opted them.
So the Bible writers are doing two things: acknowledging these forces exist, but stripping them of their independent divine status.
Precisely. They're saying, yes, these forces are real, the things you fear, but forget the Canaanite myths. They aren't competing gods. They are servants, tools, forces that operate only under the authority of Yahweh, the God of Israel.
They're dethologizing them.
That's the perfect word, dethologizing them. They take the existing cultural language of supernatural threat, but insist that Yahweh alone is sovereign over all of it. So protection in Psalm 91 isn't just from random bad luck, it's protection from these specific cosmic entities that Yahweh himself controls.
Okay, we've laid down this Old Testament foundation. Psalm 91 is packed with references to specific supernatural agents, all under Yahweh's control. Now let's fast forward. How did people living in Jesus' time, the Second Temple period, actually understand and use this psalm, given that background?
This is where things get really concrete, thanks to archaeology and textual finds. We can look directly at the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran.
The community that lived out by the Dead Sea.
Right. And scholars like Craig Evans have done work confirming what many suspected. Psalm 91, for first-century Jews like those at Qumran, was definitely understood as providing divine protection against demonic forces. It wasn't just theory, it was practical application.
What's the specific evidence from Qumran? How do we know this?
The kicker is how Psalm 91 was found grouped with other texts. It wasn't just floating around on its own. In one particular scroll, known as 11Q11, Psalm 91 is physically bundled together with other psalms that are explicitly exorcistic.
Exorcistic, like spells against demons.
Essentially, yeah. These other psalms in 11Q11 use very direct, confrontational language. They mention demons, the chaos dragon or sea monster, tannin, same root as in Psalm 91.13, and use verbs related to rebuking or exorcising evil spirits.
So finding Psalm 91, keeping company with those texts, it's like finding a screwdriver in a toolbox. You know what it's meant for by what's around it.
That's a great analogy. The bundling pretty much settled the matter, as Evans puts it. It shows its functional use, a powerful text for spiritual defense against demonic powers.
And was there anything else about the Qumran version?
Yes, something interesting. Both the Qumran scroll fragment and the Septuagint version add a title, a superscription, that's not in our standard Hebrew Bible texts.
What's the title?
A Psalm of David, attributing it directly to David.
Why is adding David significant?
Because David is the archetypal king, the ancestor of the Messiah. Attributing it to him gives the psalm a strong messianic flavor, linking its power to the expected son of David.
And did the Qumran community specifically associate David with power over spirits?
They certainly seem to. Another Qumran scroll, 11Q5, talks about David's incredible output, claiming he wrote 3,600 psalms. And among those, it specifically mentions 4 songs composed to perform over the possessed.
Wow. So there was already a tradition linking David, or the Davidic line, with exorcism.
Exactly. It establishes this expectation. The true heir of David would have authority over demons.
Okay, Qumran gives us archaeological proof. What about translations people were using?
Let's look at the Targums. These were Aramaic translations and interpretations of the Hebrew Bible, used widely because many Jews, especially in and around Palestine, spoke Aramaic as their daily language by this time.
And the Targum for Psalm 91, does it pick up on this demonic angle?
Oh, it doesn't just pick it up, it shouts it from the rooftops. The Targum translator is incredibly explicit. They basically replace the somewhat veiled Hebrew terms with blunt Aramaic equivalents for supernatural beings.
Can you give an example, like for verses 5 and 6?
Sure. Where the Hebrew has the terror of the night, the Targum translates, "You will not be afraid of the terror of the demons that go about in the night."
Oh, just straight up demons.
Yep. And where the Hebrew has the arrow that flies by day, which we link to Resheph, the Targum says, "Nor of the arrow of the angel of death that he shoots in the daytime."
Angel of death. Okay, they are not messing around. They're translating the theological implication right into the text.
They absolutely are. They interpret Ketev, destruction at noon, and Resheph, arrow plague, as these explicit entities. And there's more.
What else?
The Targum does something fascinating in verse 3, where the Hebrew just says, "He will deliver you." The Targum inserts a name. It reads, "He will deliver Solomon, my son."
Solomon. Why Solomon?
Because in widespread Jewish tradition during the Second Temple period, Solomon, David's son, wasn't just wise. He was seen as the master exorcist.
The guy with the magic rings and seals who could command demons? That tradition.
That's the one. So, by inserting Solomon's name, the Targum connects the song's protective power directly to that Davidic demon-controlling lineage. It reinforces the idea that this is about supernatural authority. And the Targum even concludes verse 10 by adding, "No plague or demons shall come near your tent."
It's undeniable then. The cultural understanding for Jews around Jesus' time was that Psalm 91 was explicitly about protection from demonic attack.
It seems overwhelmingly clear. And this wasn't just scrolls and scholarly interpretation. It filtered down into everyday practice. We see evidence in what are sometimes called Jewish incantation texts, or even magical texts.
Like amulets and things people wore for protection.
Exactly. Bowls, cups, pieces of jewelry inscribed with protective formulas. Dr. Vugden Hill has done work on this, showing how Psalm 91 was used.
How is it used on these objects? Did they write out the whole psalm?
Not always. There's an example of an amulet from Cairo, worn by a woman, used a technique called notarikon.
Notarikon, like a code.
Sort of, yeah.
What's that?
That's a shorthand where you use the first or last letters of words in a phrase, like verses from Psalm 91, to stand for the whole phrase, creating a kind of coded invocation of the psalm's power.
And the purpose of this amulet with the coded Psalm 91 reference.
The inscription on the amulet itself was explicit. It was designed, and I quote, "to drive away all kinds of demons and demonesses, evil diseases, harmful male spirits and harmful female spirits, and evil spirits male and female."
Wow. That covers pretty much everything supernatural and nasty.
It really does. It shows the psalm's very practical, on-the-ground use as a shield against a whole spectrum of perceived demonic threats in daily life.
Okay, but we have to address the elephant in the room for modern listeners. We know about germ theory, meteorology. We don't attribute lightning strikes or diseases directly to demons anymore. How do we handle this ancient worldview?
That's a crucial distinction to make. We need to remember what kind of text we're reading. The biblical writers, including the psalmist, were not writing science textbooks.
Right. They were writing theology.
Exactly. They were expressing theological truths within their own understanding of how the world worked. Their understanding often married natural phenomena, like plagues or storms, with supernatural causes like Dever or Resheph. We can't use our modern science to just dismiss the theological point they were making about God's sovereignty over all forces, including spiritual ones.
So God worked through writers who had an ancient cosmology.
It seems so. He communicated timeless theological truths through people who didn't have modern scientific knowledge. The core message, God's ultimate protection and authority over evil, remains, even if their explanation of how that evil manifested in the world, e.g. a plague demon, differs from ours. We shouldn't throw the theological baby out with the ancient scientific bathwater.
Okay, so we've established Psalm 91's immense weight. A Davidic text, understood culturally as a declaration of ultimate authority and protection against the entire roster of cosmic evil, Dever, Ketev, Resheph, demons, the angel of death. Now finally, let's go to that moment in the desert. Matthew chapter 4. Satan takes Jesus up to the pinnacle of the temple.
The highest point, yeah.
And he quotes Psalm 91, verses 11 and 12. He will command his angels concerning you. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Given everything we've just discussed, why this psalm? What's Satan's actual game here?
It's definitely not random proof texting. Satan knows exactly what this psalm represents in their shared cultural context. He knows it's seen as the ultimate charter document for the Davidic Messiah's power over darkness.
The proof of mastery over Dever, Ketev, Resheph, and over the lion and serpent mentioned just one verse later, in verse 13.
Precisely. So Satan's challenge is razor sharp. He's essentially saying, all right, if you are the Son of God, if you are this prophesied Davidic ruler with cosmic authority, prove it right here, right now. Perform the sign described in your own credentials. Jump. Show everyone, show me that you have this angelic protection, this mastery over harm, that you're superior to my domain.
So the temptation isn't just about pride or forcing God's hand. It's an intelligence-gathering operation. Satan's fishing.
I think that's a huge part of it. It's
Yeah.
a high-stakes intel op. What does Satan stand to learn?
Well, if Jesus jumps and the angels catch him,
Then Satan gets confirmation. Okay, this guy is who he seems to be, and God will intervene directly to prevent his death, at least in this way. He learns something about Jesus' status and the Father's immediate protection.
and what if Jesus jumps and isn't caught? What if he dies?
That's maybe even more valuable intel for Satan.
Hmm.
Does God just let him die? Or potentially even more revealing, does Satan learn that God's plan involves raising him up even after death?
Ah, the resurrection plan. That has to be kept secret from the powers of darkness, right? Paul talks about the wisdom hidden from the rulers of this age.
Exactly. The whole strategy of redemption seems to depend on Satan and the demonic powers fundamentally misunderstanding the cross. They need to think they've won when Jesus dies, not realizing that his death and resurrection are the very means of their defeat. Revealing the resurrection prematurely would blow the whole plan.
So Jesus can't jump. He can't take the bait.
He absolutely cannot. His refusal isn't just about piety, it's about strategic necessity. His counterquote is perfect. Again it is written, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Deuteronomy 6.16.
What's the significance of that response?
It's multifaceted. One, it asserts God's sovereignty. God decides when and how he acts, not Satan. Two, it shows Jesus won't be manipulated. He's not Satan's puppet, forced to perform tricks on demand.
He's not going to play Satan's game, especially when the purpose is to reveal information the enemy shouldn't have.
Precisely. He refuses to demonstrate the extent of his divine protection or give any clues about the Father's ultimate endgame involving death and resurrection. He maintains strategic silence on that front.
And it's fascinating what Satan doesn't quote, isn't it? He stops at verse 12.
He conveniently leaves out verse 13. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot.
The ultimate symbols of chaos and evil, the very powers Jesus came to defeat.
Right. Satan quotes the part about angelic protection, but omits the part about the Messiah actively crushing the enemy forces. Because that victory, Jesus will achieve, but not by jumping off a roof.
He achieves it through the whole mission, his life, his teachings, his death, and crucially, his resurrection. That's when he truly tramples the serpent.
Exactly. The refusal to perform the stunt in Matthew 4 is an act of profound faithfulness that preserves the strategic conditions necessary for the ultimate victory later on. If he jumped, he might have won a minor skirmish, but potentially lost the cosmic war by revealing the plan too early. His faithfulness then enabled his faithfulness on the cross. #tag outro.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've gone deep into the historical, cultural, and theological layers of Psalm 91. What's the big takeaway for us today?
Well, I think the main thing is realizing Psalm 91 is, at its core, a profoundly messianic psalm. It's about the promised Son of David, the Messiah, and his ultimate guaranteed victory over all the forces of supernatural darkness, the specific entities named or alluded to within the text itself.
So it's less about a promise that, say, individual believers will never get sick or face physical danger.
And more about the ultimate spiritual victory won by Christ, the true dweller in the shelter of the Most High. While God is certainly sovereign over nature and can protect us physically, the primary thrust of this psalm, given its language and historical usage, is spiritual warfare and the defeat of the evil one and evil ones.
So the core teaching remains incredibly relevant. Anyone who is in the shelter of the Most High, which in New Testament terms means being in Christ, shares in that ultimate victory. We have spiritual protection and authority because of what Christ accomplished.
Absolutely. That victory is secure. His faithfulness in the desert, refusing Satan's test, was a crucial step towards ensuring the victory. He would later win definitively on the cross and through the empty tomb. That's the victory believers now benefit from.
And that leads to a really provocative final thought, doesn't it? Tying back to the Second Temple expectations.
It really does. Think about this. We've seen the strong Jewish tradition, already present by Jesus' time, linking the Davidic line figures like Solomon with power and authority over demons.
Right, the exorcist king tradition.
So when Jesus begins his public ministry, what are some of his very first, most astonishing miracles?
Casting out demons, often causing huge amazement among the crowds.
Exactly. Those exorcisms weren't just random acts of power. They were profoundly coherent actions within the specific messianic expectations of Second Temple Judaism. Jesus wasn't just doing miracles, he was deliberately stepping into the role, fulfilling the profile that people already associated with the true Son of David. He was demonstrating the very power promised in texts like Psalm 91, confirming his identity in terms they would immediately understand. It wasn't out of the blue, it was expected.